Alright guys, here we are. Group tuning, the most important part of our bow tuning, and we're gonna use the super tuning technique. Stick around because very few people know how to do this, and this is gonna really blow your mind and bring you to the next level as an archer. This is the archery series and this is video number 15. We left off at our video number 12 that we installed our HHA Ultra. We didn't do any side-in of the new scope, we just installed it as low as possible to get the maximum windage and still have arrow clearance, and then we adjusted the second and third axis levels. Before group tuning, we'll adjust the scope horizontally and vertically, and then we'll dedicate the next video to choosing the perfect yardage tape so we have the scope perfectly side in at all distances. You'll see that's super easy. Also, in our video number 13 we have already installed our Total Peep Pro 316 specific for bow hunting. We adjusted it to stay perfectly aligned with the scope at half windage, so more or less 40 yards, and with the shooter drawing and assuming his best, more solid and comfortable anchor point. So then when we have to change it a little bit up and down to adjust shorter or longer distances, we're still moving around our most comfortable and solid anchor point. And then we said let's make a temporary ligature just to keep it in place while we're shooting, because we still need to fine-tune its position while group tuning, and today we're gonna do just that. Find the final position, the final height of our Peep sight, and then group tune our bow with the Supertune technique. So let's get to work. We set the maximum windage of the scope in a way the arrows clear the scope and the fletching don't touch it. Now let's turn the dial all the way backwards so that the scope goes all the way up, minimum distance, and we install the setup tape with the 10 mark at the minimum distance. I can't show you that because my setup tape is already installed, but you see that the minimum distance, the setup tape says 10. Then we move it back to 15, we lock it there, and we use it to shoot at 20 yards and side in at that distance. 20 yards on the 15 mark, so that we know that we have at least 5 notches. Those are not yards yet, but we have 5 notches to go down from 20 yards to just above 15. You don't need any closer than 15. You're never gonna shoot anything at 10 yards with your bow. Now at the shooting range, place a 2x2 red piece of duct tape on the target, and let's shoot at it at 20 yards with our sight locked on the 15 mark of the setup tape. We shoot low and right, very easy to make adjustment. We're gonna do the horizontal adjustment, turning the bow around, and looking at the scope, we're gonna move the scope towards the direction we want our arrow to go. So in our case, left, couple of notches. As for the vertical adjustment, we're not gonna move the scope dial, we're gonna move the Peep sight, and we're gonna move it in the direction we want our arrow to go. So in our case, up. We went up and left, but not enough, so let's repeat the procedure. Looking at the scope from the front, another couple of notches left, and let's move up the Peep sight a little bit more. Back to the 20 yard mark, without moving the scope dial at all, another arrow. We went up quite a bit, but not enough left, so back to the scope, let's move it a little bit more left, and the Peep sight, this time let's move it slightly down, back to the 20 yard mark, another arrow, and we're perfectly in the middle. Once again, we did all this without moving the scope up and down at all, just by moving up and down the Peep sight. And we can finally start the super tune of our bow, which is the final definitive fine tuning of the bow. And it's going to be done on the vertical axle by moving the arrow rest left and right, and on the horizontal axle by tightening the upper limb bolt or the bottom limb bolt. Specifically, if our bow is grouping on the left, we're gonna move our arrow rest towards the right, so that we move the whole group towards the right, towards the center. Vice versa, if the bow is grouping on the right, we're gonna move the arrow rest on the left so that we push the whole group towards the left, towards the center. For the horizontal tuning, we need to do micro adjustment at the height of the knocking point, and we can do that by moving the knocking point of the arrow rest. So we're gonna use the limb bolts, and if you're grouping low, we're gonna tighten up the bottom limb bolt an eighth of a turn at a time, which is gonna move your knocking point about a 1/16 of an inch down, and it's gonna move your group up. On the other side, if we're grouping high, we're gonna tighten an eighth of a turn of the upper limb bolt, which is gonna move our knocking point up and move our group down. We're gonna do it shooting at 20 and 30 yards and adjusting the horizontal windage of the scope in the process. I'll show you how. It's very easy. Now we are sight in at 20 yards. Let's shoot without moving anything 3 arrows to make sure that we are consistent in the mark at 20 yards, which doesn't mean that the bow is grouping. We just got sight in very good at 20 yards. I'll show you when we get to the 30 yards that we won't get the same group. Now put a stripe of duct tape or masking tape horizontally on top of your target, and hanging from the top, passing in the middle of the 2x2 tape we're aiming at, put a piece of strap with a weight at the end so that it stays perfectly vertical. Move at 30 yards from the target without touching anything on your bow, including the scope. It stays locked for the whole process, and shoot 3 arrows, always aiming at the red 2x2 piece of tape that we were aiming before. Of course we're gonna shoot low, but that doesn't matter. Disregard it. What we wanna see if we're grouping left or right. We're grouping right. We need to move the arrow rest towards the left, just 1 notch, because arrow rest movements affect the arrow flight a lot. Also disregard the vertical dimension of your group, just focus on the left and right. Now shoot 3 arrows at 30 yards, again with the new position of the arrow rest, and you see how much they moved on the left and how smaller the group has become. Now we're grouping at 30 yards, just about we are at 20. Now move back at 20 yards, shoot 3 more arrows at the 2x2 red square. Of course the arrows are gonna end on the left because we moved our arrow rest, and they're also a little bit low, disregard that. Now we wanna center the group on the 2x2 red dot using the left and right windage of the scope. So looking at the scope from the front, move it a notch to the right and shoot 3 more arrows at 20 yards at our 2x2 red tape. Keep adjusting the left and right windage of your scope up until you're perfectly centered at 20 yards with the new arrow rest position. We're perfectly in, good group at 20 yards, and let's move back again at 30 yards. Put the vertical stripe back on the target and shoot 3 arrows, always aiming at the same 2x2 red piece of tape. We're perfectly centered, and the horizontal dimension of the group has become very small. Left and right are very close. Now remove the vertical stripe and go back at 20 yards. Shoot 3 arrows aiming at the middle line of the horizontal stripe of duct tape that we put at the top of the target. You don't need to aim at the same point, you can aim left or right as far as you're aiming at the same height, which is the middle of the tape. We're grouping a little low, so we're giving 1/8 of a turn to the bottom limb bolt, which is gonna lower down our knocking point by about a 1/16 of an inch. We shoot 3 more arrows at the horizontal line, and as you see the group has shrinked up horizontally a lot. Now you just need to move back again at 30 yards and finally unlock the dial of your scope and lower down your scope up until you perfectly sight in at 30 yards. Then shoot 3 arrows at the red 2x2 piece of tape, and you'll see that the group is gonna be perfect at 30 yards as well. You can repeat this operation at 40, 50, 60 yards as much as you want, but when you're grouping at 20 and 30, the big part of the job is done. Thanks for watching, and as usual, please don't forget to subscribe to help the channel grow.